parents gave the home I bought to my sister behind my back, so I let the mortgage crash. You know that feeling when you finally achieve something you've worked your ass off for, only to have it ripped away in the most unexpected way? That's what happened to me when my own family betrayed me in a way I never thought possible. I'm 28, a graphic designer at a marketing firm, and I've always been the responsible one. Ever since I was a kid, I've had to work harder than my younger sister for even a fraction of the recognition. While she got straight A's handed to her for minimal effort and praise for every little thing she did, I had to fight for scraps of attention from my parents. This pattern continued into adulthood. When my sister decided she wanted to go to college, my parents paid for everything: tuition, housing, even spending money. And it was my turn. "We're a little tight right now, honey. Maybe get some student loans?" So I worked full-time while taking classes, graduated with debt, and still managed to save enough for a down payment on a modest house in a decent neighborhood. Bamso. The day I got the keys was one of the proudest moments of my life. I'd done it all on my own. Researched neighborhoods, got pre-approved for a mortgage, went through the whole home buying process. My parents seemed happy for me, even helped me move some furniture in. Sure, my sister made some snide comments about how boring my neighborhood was compared to the trendy apartment she was renting, with our parents paying half her rent, naturally. But I didn't care. This was my house, bought with my money, and I was damn proud of it. Nas. For the first 3 months, everything was perfect. I painted the living room, planted some flowers in the front yard, and even started saving for a kitchen renovation. I invited my parents over for dinner once a month, and they always commented on how cute my little house was. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. My sister started dropping by unannounced, asking tons of questions about the house. "How much is your mortgage payment? Did you have to put down a full 20%? At the time, I thought she was just curious about the home buying process. Maybe she was finally growing up, thinking about getting her own place. I even gave her a spare key so she could water my plants when I went on a week-long work trip. That trip changed everything, man. I came back to find a strange car in my driveway. Thinking it was maybe a friend of my sister's, I didn't think much of it as I unlocked the front door. But when I walked in, I found my sister lounging on my couch, surrounded by boxes and suitcases. "Oh, you're back early," she said casually, not even looking up from her phone. "What's going on?" I asked, gesturing to the boxes. "Are you staying over for a few days?" She laughed, that same smug laugh she'd had since we were kids. "No, I'm moving in. Permanently." I thought she was joking. "Very funny. Where'd you get all these boxes?" "Mom and Dad helped me pack. They're bringing the rest of my stuff tomorrow." That's when I noticed changes around my house. Pictures I'd hung were replaced with hers. My throw pillows were gone, replaced with garish ones I'd never buy in a million years. "What the hell? You can't just move in here. This is my house." She finally looked up, her expression a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Not anymore. Mom and Dad took care of everything. It's mine now. They told me to tell you they're expecting you for dinner tonight to discuss the arrangements." I was in such a state of shock that I just grabbed my keys and drove straight to my parents' house. They were sitting at the kitchen table like they were waiting for me. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and confusion. My dad cleared his throat, using that same condescending tone he'd used my whole life. "Now, don't get all worked up. We've been thinking about this for a while. Your sister needs a house more than you do. She's talking about settling down, maybe starting a family soon. And I don't deserve a house. I bought that house. With my money. My name is on the deed and the mortgage." My mom had the audacity to look offended. "Don't be selfish. You've always been so independent. You can easily find another place. We took care of the paperwork," my dad added, sliding a folder across the table. "Everything's been transferred to your sister's name. We figured you'd be reasonable about this." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a deed transfer with what looked like my signature on it. Except I'd never signed anything like this. It was a forgery, and not even a good one. "This isn't my signature," I said flatly. "Of course it is," my mom insisted. "You must have forgotten. You signed it last month, when you came over for dinner." I racked my brain, trying to remember if I'd signed anything that night. I had signed a birthday card for my uncle, but nothing else. They must have somehow traced my signature from that. "This is fraud," I said, my voice deadly calm, despite the rage boiling inside me. "I never agreed to this. I never signed this." My dad's face hardened. "Don't be dramatic. It's done. Your sister needs the house, and you'll figure something out. You always do." "And what about the mortgage?" I asked. "That's still in my name." My parents exchanged a glance. "We thought you'd keep paying it, of course," my mom said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "At least until your sister gets settled in her new job." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They'd stolen my house, given it to my sister, and expected me to keep paying for it? The sheer audacity left me speechless. "This isn't right," I finally managed to say. "Life isn't always fair," my dad replied dismissively. "Your sister has always struggled more than you. This is what's best for the family." I left without another word, my mind racing. I didn't go back to my house. No, apparently it wasn't mine anymore. I drove to my friend's apartment and just sat in his living room, telling him everything in a numb, detached voice. "You need a lawyer," he said immediately. Like yesterday. First thing Monday morning, I called in sick to work and found a real estate attorney. I explained everything, showing him the forged document. "This is blatant fraud," the attorney said, studying the signature. "But these cases can be complicated, especially with family involved. They'll claim you agreed verbally, or that you misunderstood. It could take months to sort out in court, and you'd still be responsible for the mortgage in the meantime." "So what are my options?" I asked. "We can file to invalidate the deed transfer, but that will take time. You could also report the forgery to the police, but are you prepared to potentially see your parents face criminal charges?" I thought about it. As angry as I was, the thought of my parents in handcuffs made me uncomfortable. But then I remembered their dismissive attitudes, how they'd planned this behind my back, how they expected me to keep paying for a house they'd stolen from me. "What if I stopped paying the mortgage?" I asked. The attorney frowned. "The bank would eventually foreclose. It would damage your credit score significantly, but what? But they wouldn't get to keep the house either. The bank would take it. Your sister would be evicted." I sat back, a plan forming in my mind. Maybe I couldn't fight the fraudulent transfer directly without putting my parents at risk of criminal charges, but I could make sure my sister didn't get to enjoy her ill-gotten gains. Let them deal with the bank. "How bad would the hit to my credit be?" I asked. "Substantial," he warned. "You'd have trouble getting loans, credit cards, possibly even renting apartments for several years. But it would screw them over too, right? They'd lose the house." He nodded slowly. "Yes, but I have to advise against making financial decisions out of spite." But I wasn't just being spiteful. I was being practical. Fighting the fraudulent transfer would be costly and time-consuming, with no guarantee of success if my parents lied in court. This way, I'd take a hit, but my sister wouldn't get to live in my house for free. I made my decision. I'm not paying another cent toward that mortgage. The attorney sighed. "At least let me send them a formal letter first. Maybe when they understand the consequences, they'll reconsider." I agreed to the letter, but I knew my family. They wouldn't back down until they faced real consequences. The letter was sent by certified mail the next day. It outlined the fraudulent nature of the deed transfer and stated that unless the property was returned to my name within 7 days, I would cease all mortgage payments and pursue all available legal remedies, including reporting the forgery to law enforcement. My phone blew up that evening. "What the hell is this?" my dad yelled when I finally answered. "A legal notice. I didn't sign those transfer papers. You committed fraud. You ungrateful little. After everything we've done for you." I couldn't help but laugh. "Done for me? Like what? Making me pay my own way through college while paying for hers? Always taking her side, stealing my house? We didn't steal anything. We just redistributed family assets to where they're most needed. It's not a family asset. It's my house that I bought with my money. Your sister is crying, you know. She's devastated that you'd do this to her." The emotional manipulation that had worked on me my whole life suddenly seemed so transparent. "Tell her to enjoy the house while she can, because in about 3 months the bank will be taking it." I hung up, blocked their numbers, and spent the evening apartment hunting. I found a small studio I could afford and signed a 6-month lease the next day. I'd need to downsize significantly, but I didn't care. This wasn't about the stuff, it was about standing up for myself for once. That weekend, I went back to get my essential belongings. My sister tried to block the door. "You can't come in. This is my house now," she said, arms crossed. "I'm getting my stuff, and then you'll never see me again," I replied, pushing past her. Mom and Dad told me what you're planning. You can't just stop paying the mortgage. That's illegal or something. I turned to face her. Actually, the illegal thing was forging my signature on a deed transfer. But here's the thing. The mortgage is still in my name. I'm the one legally responsible for it. And I've decided not to pay it anymore. Her face paled. But what will happen to the house? The bank will foreclose on it. You'll be evicted. And I honestly don't care. You can't do this to me, she shrieked. I've already told all my friends about my new house. It was never your house, and it never will be. I gathered my clothes, my important documents, and a few sentimental items. As I was leaving, she tried one last tactic. If you do this, Mom and Dad will never forgive you. You'll lose your family. I paused at the door. I already have. The next few weeks were hard. I moved into my studio apartment, which was barely big enough for my bed and a small desk. I got nasty texts and emails from my sister and parents, alternating between threats and guilt trips. They even sent other family members after me, aunts and uncles calling to tell me how disappointed they were in my behavior. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I focused on documenting everything. I saved every text, every email, every voicemail. My attorney said it might be useful if things escalated further. The first mortgage payment came due. I didn't pay it. A few days later, my sister called in a panic. There's a notice on the door saying the mortgage payment is late. You have to pay it. No, I don't, I replied calmly. But they'll take the house. Yes, they will. I'll sue you. Go ahead. I have documentation of the fraudulent transfer. You might want to think about how that would play out in court. She hung up on me. The next day, my mom showed up at my workplace, causing a scene in the lobby until security escorted her out. My dad tried financial threats, claiming he'd make sure I never got a loan again. As if my credit wasn't already going to be destroyed by the foreclosure. But I stood firm. The second mortgage payment came due. I didn't pay that one either. The bank sent increasingly stern notices. My sister forwarded them to me with hysterical messages about how I was ruining her life. Tart. About 2 months in, my parents showed up at my studio apartment. I only opened the door because they threatened to call the police and report me missing otherwise. You have to stop this, my mom pleaded, looking around my tiny apartment with obvious disdain. Look at how you're living now. This is ridiculous. I was perfectly happy in my house, I replied. The one you stole. We didn't steal it, my dad insisted. We just thought... You thought I'd roll over and keep paying for a house I no longer owned. Like I've done my whole life. Worked and paid for things while you handed everything to her on a silver platter. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but at least now you're facing consequences. The bank called me, my dad admitted after a moment. They said they're initiating foreclosure proceedings. I'm aware. They said my name was on some of the paperwork as a cosigner. I don't remember signing anything, but your mother might have. And there it was. The real reason for their visit. Not concern for me, but concern for themselves. I almost laughed. Sounds like you have a problem then. You need to fix this, my dad demanded. Pay the damn mortgage. No. We're your parents. You owe us. I owe you nothing. You made that very clear when you decided my sister deserved my house more than I did. They left in a huff, threatening vague legal action that never materialized. Later, I found out why. My dad wasn't actually on the mortgage. He'd lied, hoping to scare me into paying. The foreclosure process continued. 3 months after I stopped paying, my sister received an official eviction notice. She sent me a photo of it with a long, rambling text about how I'd ruined her life and how she'd never forgive me. I didn't respond. I'd learned that engaging only gave them more ammunition. Instead, I focused on my plan for recovering from this mess. I opened a secured credit card to start rebuilding my credit. I picked up freelance design work to increase my income. I started therapy to deal with the emotional fallout of cutting ties with my toxic family. 4 months after I stopped paying, the bank officially foreclosed on the house. My sister was evicted. According to mutual friends, she moved back in with our parents, who were suddenly much less enthusiastic about having her at home now that she came with all her stuff, and no end date in sight. The foreclosure destroyed my credit score, just as the attorney had warned. But strangely, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time in my life, I'd stood up to my family's manipulation and favoritism. Yes, I'd lost the house, but they hadn't won either. And that felt like victory enough for now. But this was just the beginning. As my attorney pointed out, I still had options for holding them accountable for the fraud they'd committed. And I was just getting started. 6 weeks after the foreclosure was finalized, I met with my attorney again. I'd been saving every penny I could from my regular job and freelance work, living on ramen and store-brand cereal to build up a legal fund. I want to sue them, I said as soon as I sat down in his office. For the fraud, for the damage to my credit, for everything. He nodded slowly. I figured you might. I've been doing some research on your case. And I think we have a strong position. The deed transfer was clearly fraudulent. I've had a handwriting expert look at the signature, and they're willing to testify it's a forgery. Plus, we have documentation of their subsequent behavior, admitting they did this without your consent. So we can win? I believe so. But I should warn you, family lawsuits get ugly. Uglier than what you've already experienced. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it for a moment. How my parents had always favored my sister. How they'd stolen my house right from under me. How they'd expected me to keep paying for it. The rage I'd been suppressing bubbled up again. Yes, I'm ready. All right then, let me walk you through the process. He explained that we'd file a civil lawsuit for fraud, forgery, and damages. We'd seek compensation for the down payment I'd lost, the damage to my credit score, and emotional distress. He estimated the total would be around $85,000. That sounds like a lot, I said. It is, and they might not have that much liquid cash available, but we could get a judgment against them, which means they'd have to pay over time. Wage garnishment for your sister if she's employed, liens on any property your parents own. It felt strange, thinking about taking that much money from my family. But then I remembered how they'd had no qualms about taking my house from me. Let's do it, I said firmly. The attorney filed the lawsuit the following week. My parents and sister were served papers at their home. I wasn't there to see it, but I can imagine their shock. The response came quickly. My parents hired an attorney of their own, a family friend who'd always looked at me with the same dismissive attitude they had. Their response to the lawsuit was predictable. They denied everything. According to them, I had verbally agreed to the transfer during a family dinner. They claimed I'd been drinking and didn't remember signing the papers, but that it was all completely legitimate. It was infuriating to read such blatant lies, but my attorney assured me this was normal. They're just trying to muddy the waters. Don't worry, we have the evidence on our side. The discovery process began. My sister was required to hand over all communications related to the house. My parents had to provide any documentation of the supposed agreement we'd had. Of course, they had nothing substantial, just their word against mine. But I had text messages from my sister talking about how she was going to get my house, dated before the fraudulent transfer. I had voicemails from my parents admitting they'd taken care of the paperwork for me. The case dragged on for months. Each filing, each response, each motion cost money I barely had. My tiny studio apartment felt more depressing with each passing day, but I was determined to see this through. About 4 months into the lawsuit, my sister lost her job. From what I heard through mutual friends, she'd been showing up late and leaving early, too busy dealing with the fallout from the lawsuit to focus on work. I should have felt bad for her, but all I could think was, now she knows what it feels like to struggle. 5 months in, we had our first major court hearing. It wasn't the trial itself, but a hearing on some motions my parents' attorney had filed, trying to get the case dismissed. I had to take the day off work, which meant losing income I desperately needed. But there was no way I was missing this. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and stern-faced security guards. My attorney met me outside, briefcase in hand, looking confident. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. Inside, my parents and sister were already seated with their attorney. My sister glared at me with pure hatred. My parents couldn't even look at me. Fine by me. I didn't want to see their faces anyway. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, called the hearing to order. My parents' attorney went first, arguing that this was a simple family disagreement that had been blown out of proportion. Your Honor, this is a case of a son with a grudge against his parents. They helped him buy the house in the first place. Objection, my attorney interrupted. That's completely false. My client purchased the home entirely with his own funds. There was no parental assistance whatsoever. Do you have documentation of that? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. We have bank statements showing the down payment came entirely from my client's account and the mortgage was solely in his name. The judge nodded. Continue, but stick to the facts, counselor. she said to my parents' attorney. He cleared his throat and tried again. Your Honor, the plaintiff verbally agreed to transfer the house to his sister. He's simply suffering from buyer's remorse. When it was my attorney's turn, he methodically laid out our evidence. The forged signature, the text messages, the voicemails. By the end, even I was impressed with how damning it all looked. The judge denied the motion to dismiss. Based on the evidence presented, there are serious questions of fact that need to be addressed at trial. This case will proceed. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. As we left the courtroom, my sister tried to approach me, but my attorney stepped between us. My client has nothing to say to you, he said firmly. This isn't over, she hissed at me over his shoulder. You're right, I replied calmly. It's just beginning. A week later, I received a settlement offer from my parents' attorney. They were offering $15,000 to make the case go away. No admission of wrongdoing, just a gift to help me get back on my feet. It's insultingly low, my attorney said when I showed him. Your down payment alone was more than twice that. Should we counter? Absolutely. Let's ask for the full amount and see what they come back with. We countered with our original demand, $85,000 for the down payment, credit damage, and emotional distress. They came back with $25,000. We held firm. They increased to $30,000. They're testing your resolve, my attorney explained. They think you'll cave because you need the money. He wasn't wrong. I was barely making ends meet. The legal fees were draining what little savings I had left. But I wasn't going to let them off the hook so easily. Tell them no deal. We go to trial. 2 weeks before the trial date, I received a frantic call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. Hello? It's me, my sister's voice. I nearly hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. What do you want? This has to stop, she said, her voice shaking. Mom and Dad are a mess. Dad's having chest pains. The doctor said it's stress-related. That's unfortunate, I replied, not feeling very sympathetic. They're talking about having to sell their house to pay you off. Where are they supposed to live? That's not my problem. How can you be so cold? They're your parents. They should have thought about that before they stole my house. They didn't steal anything. They were trying to help me. At my expense, as usual. She was quiet for a moment. What if? What if I testified that it was all my idea? That I pressured them into it? Would you drop the case against them? That caught me off guard. Are you admitting you committed fraud? No. Not legally. But what if I take the blame? Would you let Mom and Dad off the hook? I thought about it. There was a certain appeal to having my sister admit she was wrong, even if it was just to save our parents. But then I remembered how they'd all worked together to steal from me. No deal. You're all responsible for what happened. You're such an asshole, she yelled, her conciliatory tone completely gone. This is why nobody likes you. This is why Mom and Dad always preferred me. Thanks for the reminder of why I'm doing this, I said, and hung up. I told my attorney about the call immediately. He advised me to block my sister's number and not engage further. She might have been recording the conversation, looking for something to use against you. The week before the trial, I received another settlement offer, $60,000. It was still less than what we were asking, but it was a substantial increase from their previous offers. They're getting nervous, my attorney said. They know how bad this looks. A jury won't be sympathetic to parents who forge their child's signature and steal their house. I was tempted to take the offer. It would cover most of what I'd lost, and it would end this draining process. But something held me back. What about a formal admission of wrongdoing? I asked. I want them to acknowledge what they did. My attorney nodded. I can push for that, but it might be a deal breaker for them. Try anyway. He came back with a counteroffer, $65,000, plus a written admission of wrongdoing that I could share with family and friends if I chose to. They'd also agreed to no contact unless initiated by me. This is probably as good as it's going to get without going to trial, he advised. And trials are unpredictable. I agreed to the settlement. The relief I felt was immediate and overwhelming. It wasn't just about the money, though that would help enormously. It was the acknowledgement that I had been wronged, that I wasn't crazy or overreacting or selfish. I had been the victim, and now everyone would know it. The settlement agreement was signed 2 days later. My parents and sister didn't show up, only their attorney, looking sour-faced as he handed over the first check. The payment would be made in 3 installments, an initial payment of $20,000, followed by 2 payments of $22,500 over the next 6 months. "Where's the written admission?" I asked after accepting the check. Their attorney handed over a sealed envelope. Inside was a single page, signed by both my parents and my sister. It read, "We acknowledge that the transfer of property located at address was done without proper authorization or consent. The signature on the deed transfer was not authentic, and the property was taken without permission. We accept full responsibility for our actions and the subsequent harm caused." It was cold, legalistic, and perfect. No emotional manipulation, no excuses, just a plain admission of what they'd done. As I left the attorney's office that day, check and admission in hand, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The battle had been long and costly, but I'd won. Not just the money, but something more valuable. Proof that I wasn't the crazy one. That I had been right to stand up for myself. I deposited the check immediately and began planning my next steps. First, an apartment with actual separate rooms. Then, a consultation with a financial advisor about how to rebuild my credit. The foreclosure would stay on my record for years, but with proper management I could mitigate the damage. And with the settlement money, I had a foundation to build from. I didn't hear from my family for weeks after the settlement. Fine by me. I was busy rebuilding my life. I found a decent 1-bedroom apartment in a nice area, furnished it with simple but comfortable pieces, and settled into a routine of work, saving, and gradual recovery. Then, about 2 months after the settlement, I received a letter from my mother, handwritten, tear-stained, full of the same emotional manipulation she'd always used on me. She wrote about how much they missed me, how the family wasn't the same without me, how they'd made a mistake but they'd learned their lesson. She asked for forgiveness, for reconciliation, for a chance to make things right. I read the letter twice, searching for any genuine remorse. All I found were excuses and self-pity. Not once did she acknowledge the pain they'd caused me, just the consequences they were facing. I didn't respond. A week later, another letter, this one from my dad. His was shorter, more direct, but equally self-centered. He talked about family loyalty, about how blood is thicker than water, about how I was letting money come between us, as if the issue had been the money and not the betrayal. I didn't respond to that one either. The third letter came from my sister. Unlike our parents, she didn't pretend to be sorry. Instead, she ranted about how I'd ruined her life, how she'd had to move back home, how she couldn't afford her own place now because of the payments they had to make to me. She called me selfish, heartless, a monster who turned on his own family. This one, I did respond to. I sent a brief email. "You took my house. You forced me into foreclosure. You lied in legal documents. The consequences you're facing are the direct result of your actions, not mine. Please respect the no-contact clause in our agreement." She replied with a string of curse words and insults. I blocked her email address and went back to focusing on my recovery. 6 months after the settlement, I received the final payment. By then, I'd managed to establish some stability in my life. My credit score was slowly recovering. I had a small emergency fund. I was even dating someone new, someone who listened when I talked about my family and didn't judge me for cutting them off. The day I deposited the final check, I decided to celebrate. Nothing extravagant, just dinner at a restaurant nicer than I'd been able to afford in months. As I sat there, enjoying a meal I didn't have to cook in a kitchen I didn't have to clean, I realized something important. I was going to be okay. The house was gone. My relationship with my family was irreparably damaged. But I had stood up for myself, fought back against their manipulation, and won. Not just the legal battle, but something more important. My independence. I raised my glass in a silent toast to myself. To survival. To justice. To the knowledge that sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction, but reconstruction. Building a new life from the ashes of the old one, stronger and more resilient than before. Malakakshan built to Kashebaba a klusk ahead. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding credit takes time. Healing from familial betrayal takes even longer. But for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the journey. Because this time, I was in control. And no one was going to take that away from me again. Havecha, ahom havatia ucha, the pretty beam claim and namoshmo yurubu. 1 year after the settlement, my life had changed in ways I never could have imagined. The $65,000 had given me a solid foundation to rebuild from. I'd used some of it to pay off my student loans and other debts, immediately improving my financial situation. The rest I'd invested carefully, following the advice of the financial advisor I'd hired. May. My credit score was slowly climbing back up. The foreclosure was still there, a black mark that would take years to fully disappear, but I'd established new credit accounts and paid them religiously on time. Some landlords and lenders were willing to work with me once I explained the situation. The signed admission of wrongdoing from my family proved invaluable in those conversations. "So you didn't just walk away from your mortgage," the loan officer at the credit union said, looking over my paperwork. "You were the victim of fraud." "Yes," I replied. "I have documentation from the court case if you need it." She shook her head. "This is sufficient. It's still going to affect your rate, but we can definitely work with you." That meeting led to my first major post-settlement financial step, a small loan to start my own graphic design business. After years of working for others, I was ready to be my own boss. The settlement money had given me enough of a cushion to take that risk. I started small, working from my apartment with just a laptop and a drawing tablet. My first clients were former colleagues who needed freelance help, but word of mouth spread quickly. By the end of that first year, I had a steady client list and was making more than I had at my old job. Shit. The business wasn't the only new addition to my life. Remember that person I mentioned I was dating? Things got serious, really serious. We moved in together 6 months after the settlement, splitting the rent on a 2-bedroom apartment that was bigger and nicer than anything I could have afforded on my own while rebuilding. "Are you sure about this?" they asked the night before we signed the lease. "With everything you've been through with your family, I'd understand if you had trust issues." I thought about it carefully. I do have trust issues. But not with you. You've been here through the worst of it. And you never once suggested I was overreacting, or that I should just forgive them because they're family. "That's because what they did was unforgivable," they said, simply. That straightforward support was exactly what I needed. No manipulation, no guilt trips, just honest communication and respect. Around the 18-month mark after the settlement, I received an unexpected email from a cousin I hadn't spoken to since cutting ties with my immediate family. We'd never been especially close, but we'd always gotten along well at family gatherings. "Hey," the email read. "I heard about what happened with your parents and sister. I want you to know not everyone in the family thinks you did anything wrong. What they did was messed up, and you had every right to fight back. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I waited a day before responding, unsure if this was some kind of trap set by my parents. But eventually, I wrote back, thanking my cousin for the support and suggesting we catch up sometime. Buys. We met for coffee the following weekend. It was awkward at first. Family drama tends to have that effect. But eventually, the conversation flowed more naturally. "So how are they doing?" I finally asked, not sure if I really wanted to know, but feeling like I should ask. "Kihi." My cousin sighed. "Not great, to be honest. Your sister moved out of their house about 6 months ago. She got a job in retail, barely making ends meet. She blames them for not protecting her better during the lawsuit." I couldn't help but snort at that. Typical. Even now, she was avoiding responsibility for her actions. "And my parents?" "Your dad had to come out of retirement. The settlement payments hit them harder than they expected. Your mom is selling crafts online to try to help with expenses. They don't talk about you much, at least not when I'm around, but I can tell it still eats at them." I nodded, not sure how to feel about this information. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, knowing they were struggling just as I had been forced to. Another part felt a twinge of something like guilt, quickly suppressed. They had brought this on themselves. "What about you?" my cousin asked. "You look like you're doing well." And I realized with some surprise that I was. Despite everything that had happened, or maybe because of it, I was thriving. My business was growing, my relationship was solid. I was even starting to make new friends, people who knew me as I was now, not as the perpetual underdog to my golden child sister. "Yeah," I said, "I am doing well." Over the next few months, I cautiously reconnected with a few other extended family members who reached out. Not all of them were supportive. Some clearly believed my parents' version of events, but enough were that I no longer felt completely cut off from my family history. None of them tried to pressure me into reconciling with my parents or sister, which I appreciated. They seemed to understand that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. 2 years after the settlement, I was in a position to think about buying property again. Not a house this time, The idea of homeownership still left a bad taste in my mouth, but a small commercial space for my growing business. My credit score had recovered enough that I qualified for a business loan, albeit at a higher interest rate than I would have gotten before the foreclosure. My partner supported the decision, even offering to co-sign, but I wanted to do this on my own. This was about proving to myself that I could rebuild what had been taken from me. The space I found was perfect. A storefront in a busy area with good foot traffic, affordable rent, and enough room for me to eventually hire an assistant or two. With my business plan and improved finances, the bank approved my loan. The day I signed the lease, my partner surprised me with a small housewarming gift for the office, a framed copy of my business license. "I thought you should have something official on your wall," they said. "Something that shows what you've built, all on your own." I hung it prominently behind my desk, a daily reminder of how far I'd come. Around this time, I also started seeing a therapist regularly. The betrayal by my family had left deeper scars than I had initially realized, and I found myself struggling with trust issues and anxiety that affected both my business and personal relationships. "What you experienced was a profound trauma," my therapist explained in one of our early sessions. "Not just the loss of your house, but the betrayal by the people who were supposed to love and protect you." "But I won," I pointed out. "I got the settlement, the admission of guilt. Shouldn't that be enough?" She shook her head gently. "Justice and healing are two different things. You got justice, yes, but healing takes time and work." And she was right. Over the next several months, I worked through my anger, my fear, and my lingering sense of inadequacy. I learned to recognize the patterns of my childhood, how my parents had consistently devalued me in favor of my sister, how they'd trained me to accept less than I deserved. Most importantly, I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. Cutting off toxic family members wasn't cruel. It was necessary for my well-being. 2.5 years after the settlement, an envelope arrived in the mail with my parents' return address. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a brief note. "We know this doesn't make up for anything, but we want you to have it. No strings attached." I looked at that check for a long time, turning it over in my hands, wondering what it meant. Was it a genuine attempt at making amends? A manipulative ploy to reestablish contact? Or just an effort to ease their own guilt? In the end, I decided it didn't matter. Their motivations weren't my concern anymore. I deposited the check, but didn't respond to the note. If they genuinely wanted to make amends, they'd need to do a lot more than send money. They'd need to show real understanding of the harm they'd caused and make actual changes to their behavior. Until then, I was better off maintaining my distance. I used the unexpected $5,000 to hire my first employee, a recent graphic design graduate who reminded me a bit of myself at that age. Talented, eager to learn, but lacking confidence. I made sure to praise her work sincerely and often, something my own bosses had rarely done for me. 3 years after the settlement, my business had grown to a team of 4. We'd moved to a larger office space, and our client list included several major companies in the area. My credit score had recovered to the point where I qualified for standard loans and credit cards. I was even starting to think about buying a house again, a smaller one this time, well within my means, with no financial connections to my family whatsoever. My cousin, who had become a regular presence in my life, mentioned casually during one of our coffee meetups that my sister was engaged. The news didn't affect me as much as I might have expected. I wished her neither happiness nor unhappiness. She was simply someone I used to know, a character from a previous chapter of my life. "Your parents are pretty excited about it," my cousin added. "I think they're hoping it will give them a chance to start fresh, be better grandparents than they were parents." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "I hope they've learned something for the sake of any kids that come along. Would you ever consider, talking to them again? Not now, but someday?" I considered the question seriously. "I don't know. Maybe, if they ever showed genuine remorse and understanding of what they did, but I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not putting my life on hold waiting for an apology that might never come." The truth was, I didn't need their apology anymore. I'd found validation elsewhere, in my successful business, in my loving relationship, in the friends and extended family who stood by me. I'd proven to myself that I was worthy, capable, and strong, with or without my parents' acknowledgement. 3.5 years after the settlement, I bought a house. Not the house. That one had been sold to a young couple after the foreclosure, according to my cousin. This was a different house, smaller but with character, in a neighborhood I loved. My partner moved in with me, and we spent weekends painting walls and planting a garden. On the day we officially moved in, I took a moment alone in what would be my home office. I hung my business license on the wall, alongside a framed copy of the settlement agreement with my family. Not out of bitterness or a desire to dwell on the past, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. My phone buzzed with a text message from my cousin. "Heard you're all moved in. Congrats! How does it feel?" I looked around the room at the house that was truly mine, bought with money I'd earned, protected by contracts I'd read carefully, and signed with full understanding. I thought about my thriving business, my supportive partner, my growing circle of friends who valued me for who I was, not how I compared to someone else. "It feels like victory," I replied. Because, in the end, that's what it was. Not just the settlement or the foreclosure or even the new house. The real victory was finding my own worth, standing up for myself, and building a life where I was valued, respected, and loved. My parents and sister had tried to take everything from me. Instead, they'd inadvertently pushed me to discover just how much I was capable of on my own. And for that, ironic as it might sound, I was almost grateful. Almost. Update. 5 years later. It's been 5 years since the settlement, and I thought some of you might be interested in what's happened since then. My business has continued to grow. We now have an office with 10 employees and clients across the country. Last year, we won a regional award for small business excellence, which led to a feature in a business magazine. I wondered briefly if my parents or sister would see it, but realized I didn't actually care if they did. My partner and I got married in a small ceremony 2 years ago. We kept it simple, just close friends and the few family members I'm still in contact with. My cousin was my best person, which felt right considering they were the first to reach out after everything went down. As for my original family, I've maintained my distance. My cousin occasionally gives me updates, though I've never asked for them. My sister's marriage apparently lasted less than a year. She moved back in with my parents again afterward, which I can only imagine is going great for everyone involved. My parents tried to contact me a few more times over the years. On my birthday, they sent a card with another check inside. I donated the money to a foundation that helps victims of financial fraud. Last Christmas, they sent a package of old family photos and keepsakes. I looked through them once, then packed them away in the attic. I wasn't ready to throw them out completely, but I didn't want them in my daily life either. The most significant attempt at contact came about 6 months ago. My father was diagnosed with early-stage heart disease, treatable, but serious. My mother called, leaving a tearful voicemail about how he wanted to make amends before it was too late. I thought about it for days. Part of me was curious about what making amends would look like to them after all this time. Another part suspected this was just another manipulation tactic, using illness to force a reconciliation on their terms. In the end, I sent a brief email acknowledging that I'd heard about his health issues and wishing him a successful treatment and recovery. I also made it clear that while I didn't wish ill health on anyone, his diagnosis didn't erase the past or automatically rebuild the trust that had been broken. They didn't respond directly, but my cousin told me my father seemed disappointed but not surprised. "I think he finally understands that some things can't be fixed with a deathbed apology," they said. As for me, I've found peace with the way things are. I don't hate my family anymore. Hate takes too much energy, and I have better things to focus on. But I don't miss them either. The family I've built around myself now, my partner, my friends, my supportive extended family, even my employees, gives me all the connection and support I need. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things turned out. If I wish I'd handled the situation differently, maybe tried harder to reconcile with my parents and sister after the settlement. I always give the same answer. Absolutely not. Standing up for myself was the best decision I ever made, even though it cost me my house and temporarily damaged my credit. It showed me what I was capable of, freed me from a lifetime of manipulation, and ultimately led me to build a better life than I ever could have had if I'd stayed entangled with them. If there's one lesson I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted can lead you to what you actually need. I lost a house but gained self-respect. I lost a toxic family but built a supportive one of my choice. I lost financial stability temporarily but found lasting success on my own terms. Xie. Would I do it all again? In a heartbeat. Hu di ba. Because sometimes, the best way to come out on top isn't to climb over others, but to stand firmly on your own 2 feet, even when the ground beneath you trembles. The view from here, from a life built on my own terms, with people who genuinely support me, is better than anything I could have imagined on the day I discovered my family's betrayal. And that's the real victory. Anyway, Thank you for watching.